Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Clarisee podcast. I am Alaina, and as always, I am so excited to be here having this conversation with you. Now, for newcomers or those who need a reminder, the purpose of every Clarisee conversation we have is to see ourselves, others, and God clearer so we can live this abundant life that we were created for. Now, remember, Clarisee is a vlog, and a podcast. So you can watch, read, or listen to the content on various platforms and at clariseeblog.com. Also, stay tuned because I'll be announcing some exciting news later on in May. If you know me, then you know May is my favorite month because it's my birthday month. You know what? I'm going to announce one of the surprises right now. Drum roll, please. Yeah, my mama back there giving me a drum roll. So Clarisee shirts are now available. I love options. So there are 4 designs with 3 style options in various colors for you to choose from. So head on over to clariseeblog.com and shop around and grab some Clarisee merch. All right, so let's get into this convo. Now, if you know anything about my father, my daddy, then you know I am the daughter of a comic book aficionado. I mean, if they gave out degrees, this man would have a PhD. So, of course, I inherited a love of Marvel movies. Now, I like DC, but honestly, Marvel is where it's at. But these superhero stories, they tell epic tales of these people who have great abilities and face these insurmountable odds to come out victorious. Well, not an end game. That was a bit depressing, but they got around to it in the next movie. Anyway, when you watch these movies or you hear these stories, it seems so exciting to be this regular person living a normal life. And one day you collide with this person or this experience that makes you realize there's more to you than who you thought you were. And after this moment, life just can't go back to normal. Well, I guess I'm living my own superhero story because this month was that moment for me. And I have a feeling that right now is that moment for you. One thing every superhero has in common is an origin story. It answers the questions: who am I? What have I been through? And why and how did I get here? These origin stories is a point of inspiration that the hero can draw on when defeat seems inevitable. And it serves as their North Star to remind them who they are when they forget. But what happens when you misunderstand your own origin story? That was the realization I was confronted with this month. And that's the topic of today's conversation. I think I love superhero stories because they're snapshots of a person living a limitless life. They do what seems impossible and face these odds that just are overwhelmingly insurmountable. It seems like fantasy, but this is the reality God is challenging all of us to live. An abundant, limitless life is the promise He has for all of us. Honestly, I know I want it. But deep down, there is a place in me that wonders, can I handle it? When God is showing you glimpses of a life so beyond what you believe you've ever experienced, part of you may doubt that you won't screw it up. And the thought may cross your mind, do I even want it? These doubtful thoughts are the same ones I see depicted on the silver screen. Every main character wonders if this life and becoming this person is what they want. But I realize the stories are never told about the people who say no. The lives of the normal are rarely noteworthy, especially when they had the opportunity to become extraordinary and they just chose not to. So here's the clarity point. Here's the clarity point for the episode. Every turning point in my life has come from a revelation that either who I believed I was or what I believed happened wasn't completely true. It's always about an unrealized truth. That's probably why I love truth so much. So often, it's been my saving grace. And this month, I realized that there are parts of my origin story that I have missed and misunderstood. But I see that when God reveals the missing pieces, it's always because it's time to reclaim something meant to propel you forward. So here's what we have to consider. If there's more to your story, then there's more to you. And if there's more to you, then there's more for you. But a different mindset and motivation is required. So the real question is, are you willing to let go of who you thought you were to become who God created you to be? And are you willing to let go of what you thought your life has been to accept His truth of your story? Because honestly, a limitless life is what's at stake. Okay, so here's the backstory. I have learned that a limited life is always self constructed, first in perspective and then in behavior. Right now, there is this amazing life on the table, but I want it, and God has told me that He's given it to me. But as I was going after it, there was something in me that wasn't quite right. And y'all, God actually jacked me up about this. He showed me that I'm pursuing what He promised, but I'm not moving with any boldness or confidence. I'm going forward, but doubt is delaying me. So I'm moving at half speed because I'm not all in. But the question that made me stop in my tracks was, if I want it, why am I not all in? Well, the answer to this was because something in the origin story I believed had convinced me that this life may not really be mine to have. So the only way to move forward at full speed was to address this. What in my story was trying to disconnect me from the promise? That's what I had to discover. So, to help you locate the misunderstandings in your origin story, here are a few examples from mine. The first example I call my happily ever after. I was talking to one of my friends about what God's been telling me about the next relationship I'm getting into and how I am excited, but I low key, high key, wonder if I can handle it. You see, by my count, all of my relationships have been traumatic in their ending. In many ways, they were good people, but not whole. And neither was I, honestly. So the wounds in them hit the wounds in me, and we just boom, 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 met a tragic end. And because of this track record, part of me wondered, how would I actually be in a healthy, balanced, God centered relationship? I had so many doubts. Deep down, I questioned, did I even really desire a pure relationship that wasn't tainted with lust? Do I even truly want a relationship that's pure and righteous, or do I only have an appetite for lust and sexual impurity? Yeah, my mind was going. I wondered, what would it be like to be whole and to be with someone who was whole too? Or to not attract a project because I needed to feel useful, to not trade my sexual purity standard for my desire to feel wanted. What would it be like to truly be chosen and valued and seen in a relationship? Or to truly have a partner who loves and supports me so the relationship isn't one sided? It seemed like a pure relationship was a foreign concept, but it's because I saw my entire romantic history as toxic. But what if that wasn't actually true? Yeah, I was so worried about how I would handle the relationship God was sending me. And I wondered how I would react in this foreign situation only to discover it was actually familiar. You see, my very first relationship was actually pure and untarnished. There was no toxic behavior, identity issues, or sliding sexual standards. He was sweet, and I was comfortable and secure in who I was. This predated any insecurity and the need to be wanted. But somehow, since this didn't fit with the toxic past I remembered, my mind discarded it. I erased the good that was my genesis, and losing that part of my story made me fearful I could successfully exist in a whole relationship. It was in finding the correct origin point that I accessed power I had been missing my whole journey. And seeing that showed me the moment everything fell out of alignment. I saw that point of impact where I went left instead of right, and in God's mercy, He took me back to the place and He healed it. And now I don't doubt that I can be successful in the relationship that God is bringing me because I know on some level I've done it before. I no longer have a legacy of utter failure. I have had pure desires, a balanced relationship, and upheld my sexual purity standards before. So I have the confidence that I can do it again. You see, pain has a way of attempting to rewrite history and erase goodness. For decades, I have misunderstood my romantic point of origin. You see, a little more of the backstory. The summer after my senior year of high school, I started a relationship with a boy who I thought was the love of my life. And y'all, I could not have been more wrong. For 4 years, we were inseparable, but our relationship was problematic, to say the least. And it was doomed to end badly. No matter how loved ones tried to help me see our issues, I was determined to hold on out of loyalty until the toxicity hit a depth that even I couldn't ignore. The pain of this relationship left a mark on my heart and my memory to the point that it erased what came before it. Although this was by far my most impactful relationship, it was not my first. And for a long time, this was something that I forgot. Yeah, the realization that I had gotten this wrong for so long hit me like a ton of bricks. I thought I was the expert of my own story, but I forgot that I am not the author. I live it, but I don't always see it clearly. So there are bound to be things that I have missed and misunderstood. That's why it's so important to take God's interpretation as truth and to ask Him what He sees. There's always a point in your story that aligns you with the promises of God. This launch point is meant to connect you with what you've had to the promise He's giving you. But if you discard essential pieces of your story, then you will feel disconnected instead. If God's promises feel foreign to you, there are pieces of your origin story you need to go back and get. Now remember, God's promises can feel new, but they are never meant to feel foreign. Something in you should always recognize something in it as familiar. I believe if we look, we will see that His presence and His goodness weave throughout our lives, giving us enough familiarity to recognize His hand moving in our lives. We've just got to remember what it looks like. And we've got to remember what it feels like, or our life will give us amnesia to the point we'll treat it like His goodness never existed. Every promise is a part of God's goodness, and his goodness is a part of him. So every overwhelmingly good thing we experience should only remind us of him. Y'all, he's always the connection point. Now, this next example I call one step at a time. Shout out to Jordan Sparks. I still rock out to that song. Now, right now, one thing I'm trying to lean into is trusting God when he only reveals one piece of his plan at a time. I've never really liked this breadcrumb line, but this is how God is handling me right now. So I'm rolling. I have a glimpse of where I'm going, but I don't see how it will all come together. And that's been a bit uncomfortable. Can't even talk about it. It's so uncomfortable. It's been uncomfortable for me to say the least, but I am giving it all I've got. As far back as I can remember, I have always been a look before you leap. Let's make a plan and then have a backup plan sort of person. Honestly, a sound plan is my comfort zone. I'll move forward in obedience without it, but I'd really rather not go through that rigmarole. I know I sound old sometimes, but it's who I am. Anyway, this let's make sure our plan is fail proof type of person is who I have always been. Well, I could confidently say that before, but a revelation came this month that completely obliterated the truth of that statement. Before me, before this me came to be, there was another version that didn't have this problem. I had just forgotten her. So then I had to figure out what happened to her. You see, trauma attempts to alter our identity by distorting how we see ourselves and by marking some things that will deliver us as dangerous. We quarantine ourselves off from destiny. We may have assumed this is how we've always been, but now is the moment to confront that truth. Is this truly the original design of you, or is this version self created? The truth of my origin story is I know how to be fearless and move forward with an unfinished plan in boldness and confidence. As a little kid, I would do things afraid all the time. My older sister was a daredevil, and we got into all kinds of things that seemed like great plans to us, but were faulty and incredibly dangerous. But fear and being uncomfortable, back then, none of those things meant stop. I felt it, but I kept going because I believed in the plan, however dangerous or unfinished it was. I believed we would be successful because I trusted the planner. Y'all, if I could trust God as much as I trusted my older sister when I was little, oh, I'd be unstoppable. I realized that somehow, little by little, I increased the boundaries of what I deemed impossible and uncomfortable in my life. In my attempt to create safety, I imposed limitations on God until a limited life was what I thought was normal. But I don't want to live a limited life anymore. So if I have to live not fully knowing the next step of the plan, I'll do it because I know it'll lead me to the limitless life I truly desire. I discovered in some areas I had normalized dysfunction, and this month was the time for it to go because it couldn't coexist with the limitless life I wanted. You see, there are some experiences that left a hole on my heart that I filled with things that made me feel fulfilled, but didn't actually bring fulfillment. One of the things that'll let you know that you've been substituting with a counterfeit is when fulfillment comes, it scares you because you're not used to the real thing. So it feels unsettling, unknown, and dangerous. It's like people who don't like water or vegetables. You've substituted with other things so much that you've never developed a taste for what's healthy. In essence, you've had a diet of dysfunction. I am amazed at how quickly God will deliver us from our own foolishness when we decide we don't want it anymore. God has rescued me from so many dysfunctional habits, and all I had to do was accept His truth that they weren't a part of His design for my life and decide I didn't want them anymore. Sometimes change isn't as hard as we make. The struggle really comes because we say we're done, but we don't stay done. So, my last example is ironically called First Identity. This one actually was an unexpected hit that just completely knocked me out. A friend and I were talking about our career aspirations and all of the things we faced as Black women or being the only in our respective positions. Sometimes when you're the first or the only person who's reached the level you have, asking for more seems like too much, since it feels like you should just be grateful you're there at all. Dreaming big enough to consider what you want and not just taking what has been handed to you seems a bit dangerous because somewhere in your mind you think at any moment they might realize that you're really not worth the trouble anyway. Now, this definitely was not a convo where we were feeling confident. Actually, imposter syndrome was front and center, and we had to face the reality of our own limited thinking. This wasn't a convo for those living a limitless life. But by the end of the conversation, some would say we decided to move with white man energy. But what we committed ourselves to was going after the abundant and limitless lives that God has for us. What I realized after that conversation was where my limited perspective was sourced from in this area of my life. And I had to repent. I have often identified more with being a Black woman than being a child of God. Now, don't misunderstand me. I am proud to be a Black woman. I think that we are phenomenal. But when I move with the perspective that historically I am on the bottom of the totem pole and disrespect and double standards and misogynism are expected divots in my career path, it siphons some of the momentum I need to move forward. For me, this being the primary part of my identity was making me expect less and not abundance. But when I think of what is mine as a child of God, I don't need white man's energy. That perspective equips me with enough entitlement to approach every moment with boldness and confidence and to step into every room with dominion. See, there are things I have said that I wanted and tried to go after and failed. At least it was failure in my book. But I am discovering that it was mostly because all of me didn't believe that this was mine. What's impossible and what we deem impossible for us can be different. And usually it's because we let our past disqualify us, at least our interpretation of it. What we can have and what we can do is all based on who we believe we are. So, this is the reality of my origin story. I am a child of God first. Before I had gender or race, I was His. And that is the identity I consider when I look at what is possible for me. That is what gives me the faith that victory is imminent. A limitless life comes from a limitless perspective that says, I can have what I want because of who I am. Your identity will either empower you to live a limitless life or construct limitations that you will exhaust yourself trying to get around. My identity as a Black woman empowered me, but not enough to reach the life that God was showing me. I needed more. Okay, so it's time to shine the spotlight. Those were some of my discoveries, but now I want to step back and create space to focus on yours. If you are feeling stagnant or stuck, doubtful, delayed, or disconnected from the promises of God, you need to take a look at your origin story. The first step is you've got to stop accepting this version of your story as the truth. When I questioned the validity of my story and detached myself from it, that's when I could see the truth. So you've got to break the alignment. So, question for you. Are there any parts of your origin story that you need to confront instead of taking it as the truth? I realized the misunderstandings in my story because there were areas God was pushing me to move forward in. But although I wanted it, for some reason, I just couldn't be all in. I knew I wasn't giving 100%, but I had to discover why. There is something in you that has made your victory or deliverance or change or progress or the promise unattainable. And you need to know why. I guarantee you, God has been trying to reveal the answer to you, and you just haven't seen it. So consider this. What areas has God directed you to move forward in that you know you want but haven't seen progress? What I have learned is anytime we have trouble moving forward, there is some part of us that is still attached to that place of less. Whether we believe it's who we've always been, or what we've always done, or all that we've ever had, some part of our story makes it okay for us to accept less than the best, than the more God is trying to give us. We say we want more with our mouths, but our behavior shows parts of our hearts are still desiring to stay where we are. So be honest with yourself. Are you really done with this? Whatever this is. It's not until we reject where we are that we can pursue the better we say we want. So for me to disconnect from the less I've become accustomed to, I usually have to see that it's not what I want. To see that, I have to see the damage or the harm it's caused or the ways it's no longer the best option for me. Essentially, to me, it has to become sin. James 4:17 is one of my favorite scriptures, and it is the motivation for this mindset. So if I know that this is not good for me and that I need to cut it out of my life, seeing it as damaging as sin makes it easier for me to separate from it. Otherwise, I'm liable to compromise, slide back, and hinder my forward progress. So to decide what stays or goes, I inspect my fruit. I ask myself questions like these. Since this person, activity, commitment, or thing has been in my life, how has my peace, my joy, and my progress looked? Essentially, am I more productive, more at peace with those around me? Am I experiencing more of God's presence? What is different? And has this being in my life helped me to move toward the promises of God? Or has my momentum slowed? Or have my standards been compromised? Or has this helped me grow in the areas God wanted me to? Has it helped me become the person I wanted to be? Essentially, what we're asking is since this has been in my life, who have I become? The truth is, everything contributes something to our lives, but we have to consider if the contribution is positive. If the goal of our lives is to become more like Christ, anything that's not helping us move toward that goal is drawing us away from it. So we have to decide which direction do we want to go because there is no neutral. Our origin stories may not all be the same, but we have the same point of origin. We were all created by a loving God who has a vision for our lives. And for each of us, the story is bound to get skewed. So we all are in a constant state of rediscovering our author and learning the truth of our own story. And it's the realignment of our origin story that makes it possible to truly live a limitless life. Now, before we wrap this up, I want you to beware of the trap. When answering the question, what do I want? There is always the temptation to try to make it happen ourselves. Now, it's a trap, so please don't fall for the okie doke. I call it the double vision trap. When either through distraction or avoidance, we've had a habit of not focusing on what we want, we can then overcorrect and begin hyper focusing on only what we want. Vision boards, planning, manifesting, it can be a slippery slope that hijacks the vision for our life. My advice to you is to dissect your own heart to know what you want, understand why you want it, and then surrender. Because whatever vision you can conceive is still too small. To live a limitless life, your vision has to be divine, and that can only come from God. When I started asking God what He wanted for me rather than begging for what I wanted, my life blew up in ways I never saw coming. In a good way, though, in a good way. In a nutshell, a limitless life is a surrendered one. So if the thought of surrendering makes you hesitate, ask yourself, what dangers have I assigned to surrendering the vision for my life? And then think, where has creating your own vision for your life taken you? You would think that surrendering your life to God would mean a boring life filled with never ending prayer sessions or super Christian phases, pantyhose, long skirts, and an avoidance of anything fun. But it has been the most exhilarating thing I've ever done. Doors I couldn't have imagined have opened and opportunities have just fallen in my lap. I used to be so worried about what I would have to sacrifice when I surrendered my life. But I can honestly say everything I gave up only made room for something better. Things have happened to me that I never could have done for myself. When you have surrendered your life, God is constantly upgrading your vision before you even get a chance to ask. Submitting to His vision is honestly the only way to not outgrow the vision for your life. So here's the main thing, the key to all of it: deliverance is essential. The limitless perspective is a healed one, a delivered one. Because sometimes you can only see who you'll become when you clearly see who you have been. There is no moving forward without being delivered. So how? How do you do it? As you can see from my misunderstood origin story, pain and fear and trauma change you. And these things can be housed inside of you. So ask God to search you, to show you what is in you that He didn't design to be there. And ask Him to show you what spirits you're operating in that are not of Him. Then command them to leave and ask Him to deliver you. But a maintenance plan is still necessary. We've all experienced feeling like we've made so much progress to look up and find ourselves back in the same mess we were in before, sometimes worse. What has helped me are resources like the Woman Arise ebook by Amanda Ferguson and the podcast that she has. Also, daily time with God, where I ask Him to purify me and show me anything in me that I need to face. And then also journaling my thoughts and experiences so I can reflect and see the patterns in my own story. These are part of my resources to get and maintain my deliverance so that nothing hinders me from living a limitless life. Y'all, this is your moment. This is your turning point where you decide to be all in and live the limitless life you were created for. Don't play me. I know you want more, and it's yours for the taking. I pray you will inspect your origin story, accept the truth, and surrender your vision for your life. I will be praying for you, and I want to know your thoughts, your questions, your experiences, and what your journey is like as you pursue a limitless life. So please, please, please let me know what impacted you about this. In any questions that come to mind, you can always connect with me on social media or send me a message or leave a comment on this blog post at clariseeblog.com. I am invested in your journey and I can't wait to continue this conversation with you. So talk soon.